The Education Department in KwaZulu-Natal has yet to fully resolve the lack of meal delivery to school children in need. About 5,400 schools in the province have not been getting food deliveries. On Tuesday, Premier Nomusa Dube-Ncube promised that Education MEC Mbali Frazer and her staff were addressing the issue. However, schools are reporting that food is still not coming through completely. There has been some progress, but it's not completely resolved. And as we know, thousands and thousands of children rely on the National School Nutrition Programme for at least one solid meal a day. eNCA reporter Lethiwe Mdluli following that story for us. So, Lethiwe, just talk to me about exactly what the situation is with the food. How many children are now getting a meal? How many are not? What's the situation at schools?
Well, Sally, overall in KwaZulu-Natal, over 2 million learners depend on this nutrition program. KZN is one of the biggest provinces that has a huge number of learners, and as you mentioned, about 5,400 schools rely on the food nutrition program. And unfortunately, since last week, majority of these schools have not been getting the food that they much need. So today we actually spoke to the Department of Education because they were presenting their budget at the KwaZulu-Natal legislature. We've been chasing them for a response to this crisis since last week, and they've been very quiet. In speaking to some of the department's officials, they are saying that 90% of the schools in the province have been provided with food, but unfortunately there are some of those schools that are still in need. And in talking to the schools that have gotten some food delivered to them, they are saying that it's not enough. One of the schools that we visited was in Tuzuma, and the name of the school is Bekisisa High School. When we went there, we actually saw a delivery van delivering some food, but when we asked the service provider, he told us that the food was meant to last the school about 8 days. But unfortunately, in speaking to the principal, he told us that the food was only going to last them about 2 days because about 800 children eat at that school every day. So you can see some of the miscommunication that has been out there, which means that this school for 6 days does not have food provided for. And it seems as if the department is trying to run away from taking responsibility for this matter, basically blaming the service provider that they appointed for this tender. Today we heard from opposition parties as well at the legislature who basically came out guns blazing against the Department of Education. They are accusing them of various things. The first being that this tender was awarded to one service provider, a company named Pasina Retail. And the opposition parties are saying that this company is linked to a tenderpreneur from KwaZulu-Natal, and they are saying that this person is also politically linked to the ANC here in KwaZulu-Natal. And there's been questions around how this person got to be the main service provider. Mind you, Sally, before the department used to give out tenders to various people across the province. So that system worked well. But now there are some issues which the Department of Education are calling logistical issues. And a lot of service providers that we've been speaking to have been questioning why the system was changed when it was working just fine. But opposition parties are also having the same questions and also accusing the ANC here in the province of awarding this tender because they want to take the money and use it for their campaigns for next year's elections. So there's a lot of allegations that are coming through from opposition parties. One of the opposition parties that we actually recorded a bit earlier on during the debates at the legislature was Ntomuhle Khawula from the IFP. He was questioning why this tender was given to this specific businessman here in KwaZulu-Natal. This is what he had to say.
The bid adjudication committee looked at all the applicants in terms of their capacity to deliver whatever they had, and in terms of whether they met the requirements that were advertised in the bid. And they came up with a service provider that, ticked all the boxes in terms of the advertised requirements. And they followed the processes, for example, processes of going to check the functionality of that service provider. The bid evaluation committee did that. They went to check the warehouse, where this would be. I mean, where the bulk supplies would be held, and they were satisfied as a bid adjudication committee that that service provider would deliver. That service provider's name, if you wanted the name, is Pasina Retail. It's not a secret, because after the processes have happened and the bid adjudication committee has recommended, we publicize that information that we intend appointing this entity to do this job.
Yeah, so a lot of people are slamming the MEC and just saying, saying that their logistical issues just not good enough. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
It's not true. It's not true. The IFP is lying. Let me start by correcting Honorable Kaul that there is no Sandile Zungu. There is no Sandile Zungu. I don't know where he got that name from. And fortunately enough, anyone can just go and check this Pasina Retail and check who the owner is. I mean, if he had said this outside the house, he was going to pay, because he used somebody's name wrongly. It's not, it's definitely not. So there's nothing like that. That is the first one. The second one, if he's talking about the connection, politically connected, I don't understand what is it that he was talking about. Again, it's not true. That is the second one. Then the third one, if they are saying we are going to be using this money for campaign, how so? Because there are systems in the department. How are we going to take the money for food, then campaign with? If the IFP does that, unfortunately, it doesn't go that way with the ANC.
All right, so the MEC flatly denying any wrongdoing and having one service provider, whereas, as you've pointed out, it was very clear that multiple service providers were doing a good job. Did you get any real explanation as to how it actually went wrong? I mean, logistical issues is quite a big term, because you need to understand what went wrong to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Well, Sally, we did ask the HOD, Mr. Ngobo, about some of the specifications that they had out there before they awarded the tender to this specific service provider. And I'd just like to clarify that in the first bite, that was the HOD for the Department of Education, where he was basically clarifying who the service provider is and why they awarded the tender to them. But one of the specifications was that the person who will get this tender would have to have a warehouse where they can store the food. And this is where the Department of Education is saying that a lot of service providers that used to work for the Department of Education before, unfortunately, did not have warehouses, so they had to go with someone who met the specifications, and this specific company met those specifications. They're also saying that they were trying to cut costs when they just appointed one service provider. But what we have heard from the National Basic Education Department is that this has never been done before. This is the first time that a province actually appoints just one person, because it's a huge responsibility. There's a lot of schools that they have to cover and a lot of ground that they have to cover. Here in KwaZulu-Natal, there's a lot of districts, and we've heard from service providers from the Zululand districts where they are saying that sometimes when they have to collect food at a warehouse, they have to drive over hours. If you're coming from Pongola, if the warehouse is in Ulundi, that's a huge distance to drive. So the Department of Education did not really look into these logistical issues that the service provider is currently suffering from. And we did ask the Department of Education, Sally, what they would be doing to basically rectify this issue and deal with the service provider. What forms of punishment are they going to face, whether they will be facing any ramifications. And they are saying that they have written to the service provider and they're currently in talks. This is from the HOD, saying that they will be communicating with them and they will follow all processes and look into whether the service provider will be able to move forward and provide food to the schools. So it's something that we're just going to have to pay attention to and see whether the schools will will have enough food maybe moving forward the next month. We will be touching base with them and just basically calling them and finding out if the food is being delivered. Are they happy with the food that they're getting? Because we've also heard from other schools that in a lot of cases they're getting rotten food. So we will be keeping an eye on the story and bringing you more updates as to what is happening on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. So important. So some food is getting out, but it's not enough necessarily. Some of it is rotten, and no real answers from the KwaZulu-Natal Education MEC. And I apologise, we played the HOD bite, the head of department in the Education department in KwaZulu-Natal instead of that IFP member. But we will get to that. We will hear from him later in the show. Thank you so much for that update, eNCA reporter Lethiwe Mdluli there.